And good morning on this wow, really is it? It is the 26th day of July 2018. Hi, I'm Roy Potter. Welcome to the Potter Expositor. And as some of you realize, I've been down a little bit. I don't mean down in a bad way. I mean, I just haven't been doing much here on YouTube or a little bit on Twitter. Even there, I'm backing off some. And there are some various reasons for that. One is that there's so many voices out there that are talking that I'm not so sure that what I'm doing is of all that in great importance at this point. I think I fulfilled my promise to the Creator of that what I was going to do, number one. Number two, I figured it was time to start getting some exercise this summer besides just walking, and I started playing golf again, as some of you might know. Yesterday was interesting. If you're on Twitter and you saw my tweets, it was right around 100 degrees, give or take a degree or two, and it was an 18-hole course, and holy cow, some of those, I mean, 600 yards almost on two of the fairways, and there were only three that were under 300 yards, and all the rest were 300 yards and over. Actually, over 300 yards, and 400 and up to almost to 6. And being so hot, I didn't take enough water, and boy, I wore myself out. After I got back to the clubhouse, I had to sit down and recuperate for like an hour drinking ice water. So anyway, but it's good. It's the kind of thing that I need to do. I even heard I tweeted that out, and then I got a tweet from a guy by the name of Paul Ferber. Some of you might know him as Baruch the Scribe. He's one of the founders of the 4chan board, which of course was taken over by somebody else after they got hacked. But at any rate, I keep in touch with him, and he said, we'll have to play a game of golf sometime, and I said, that'd be great. There is one small problem. My understanding is he's in South Africa. Yeah, well, I don't think I'm going to be going there. He probably travels here more than I'd ever go to South Africa, especially under the circumstances that exist there now, which is really what I'd like to talk to him about, since he's from there, about really what's happening is the white genocide that's occurring in South Africa, whether the media and the political correct people, the leftist Marxists, and even the conservatives want to talk about that. That is in fact happening. And Russia, of course, Vladimir Putin has agreed, actually he's opened his country up to the white farmers and people from South Africa if they want to emigrate to his country. I think he's the only one that's done that. Isn't that interesting? Nobody else seems to care. Now, people might say, oh, they deserve what they get because look what they did during apartheid and all that. That's the problem. What's this revenge about? It's wrong. And I don't care who you are, when you throw in with the wholesale murder and displacement of anyone, it's wrong. So at any rate, that's a shadow of things to come across the world. And I know people don't want to hear that, and I'm not saying that just because I'm white. It's because that we've seen it in history. We've seen how these things move, and there is in fact a concerted effort at this point by rich white guys, for some strange reason, to destroy the influence of the white folks in the world. And I don't want to get into a big discussion and argument over that, but that's really what's going on. We could talk about those same kind of white guys and what they did to their own people during World War II, but anyway, we'll just go away from that. There's an occultic reason for doing that, and some of you might understand what that is. But anyway, I'd like to talk to Paul about that, not the Q stuff. I think, like I say, I'm done with the Q stuff, even though last night I put out that information on QAnonites, is what I call them now, because they are a sect, a religious sect of sorts, not a spiritual sect, a religious sect. And yes, I'm going to bang them really hard today, like I did last night. I didn't really want to start off there, but I might as well so I can get it out of the way. we're seeing them do the same types of things on a witch hunt type of basis that we've seen throughout history. We saw it with, well, we've seen it with a lot of groups. As a matter of fact, right now you're seeing it with the blacks against the whites in South Africa. You're seeing it, or you've seen it with Islam, eradicating anybody who doesn't agree with them and join them. Back, and I talked about Hypatia, she was the librarian, very brilliant, beautiful woman in Egypt, in Alexandria, who was a pagan. And of course, a pagan is anybody who doesn't believe like you, is really the concept, but great lady, very intelligent, and the Christian zealots killed her because of who she was and what she stood for, which wasn't anything bad, by the way, despite the term pagan that was attached to her. So we see these things constantly happening, and of course now, we've gone from the QAnon thing being a source of information to, if you don't go along with Q, you're some type of a betrayer or deep stater or whatever. And of course, I've talked about that and the fact that I saw it coming out as a cult very early on. So they've moved away from attacking, well, they're still doing it, attacking anybody who doesn't go along with them. Even back a few months ago, they attacked Mike Cernovich and Jack Posobiec, and that was at the behest of the Q team, by the way. At any rate, that they would be outed along with Roy Potter. Can you imagine President Trump being concerned about outing Roy Potter and Mike Cernovich and Jack Posobiec? Really? And people still buy into this nonsense? Oh, that's fine. Like I said, I don't care if they use it for a source of information, but what's going on now is what I've been concerned about, beginning with the attack on patriots, and now this whole thing with going after supposed pedophiles. They're making it up when they're so desperate now because most of their prophecies, their predictions haven't come true. Podestas aren't in jail, for instance. Sessions is obviously AWOL. A lot of things happening here. Huber, I keep hearing this, he has 400 prosecutors at his disposal. Huh? That came from Professor Turley. That was his estimation at the time. That's not really what's happening. That's what should have happened, and Turley understood that, but that's not what's occurring. Like I said, I worked with Huber for some time back in the 90s. Not a bad guy, but he's an establishment dude, and I know that, especially with the Mormon influence, where he's got to toe the line because of his oaths to the church leadership, which these days is tied into the federal government. Just the fact of the matter. So I'm not expecting much there. But anyway, the whole point of this is, of course, that the whole Q thing went off the rails, if it was ever on the rails in the first place. And Paul Huber, Baruch the scribe, would say that it started out right. And I'm not disagreeing with that. I saw some things there that were very likely to be the case early on. And as you know, I went with it. But anyway, getting back on the problems now. Now the whole thing is that, yeah, we know that there's a problem in Hollywood, but we're throwing evidence out the window. It's all being tried in the media. That's why I've called this what I have. This whole thing with the witch hunt and media trials. The very thing that the conservative movement has complained about with the leftist Marxists, and that's the way I'm going to put that, because they can be Democrats or Republicans. Now they are committing themselves with the say-so of one or two people that, for whatever reason. Now, 0 Hour 1 has done an excellent job, as I think Unirock did. I saw a bit of his program last night where they were saying, that we're taking the word of this one person or two people or whatever in this circumstance where they're pointing fingers at people. No evidence. No evidence at all. Yeah, could there be a big cover-up? Even the father who sold his daughter into some sex cult or whatever, could he be covering up for his wrongdoing? As Monty Graf says, where is the evidence? Before we start ruining people's lives and pointing fingers, it might be one thing to say, let's look at this, but this is out of control. Anyway, as I said last night, I have gone on a purge on my Twitter and not so much on YouTube yet, although I'm not really sure how to do that on YouTube. Well, I do actually. Not because I have a personal thing against these people, but because first of all, they're clogging up my timeline with baloney, with the stuff that they spout, with Mueller being, secretly helping Trump and Sessions and all that stuff. And then this whole QAnon thing, QAnon went down for a while, and I said, the reason for that is because it's like a break during a series, a television series. You'll have the season time, and then it goes off, and they play reruns for a while, and then it comes back with the new programming. That's all that happened there. They just had to figure out a new angle. I heard that it also may have changed hands. Well, I don't know about that, but that's the reason why they went down. And of course, there was some pressure coming down on them from various places, which is going to resume, by the way. The people that are looking into them aren't done with that. But at any rate, so what I ended up doing is, I say, blocking or unfollowing those people. It wasn't a thing about it wasn't a personal vendetta or anything. I'm just tired of their crap on my timeline. And I don't need the information. I don't want it. If people that follow me want that information, they can go follow them. I don't want to see it. I don't want to talk about it, other than what I'm doing here out of necessity. So a lot of those folks got blocked, and one of the very first was Sarah Ashcraft. And I won't go into the reasons why, but there were problems with what I was seeing from her, and I just didn't, anyway, so what's happening now is that there's some people that have come out, they've talked to the family, and like I say, you'll say, oh, they're just covering up their guilt. That's real nice to point fingers with no evidence, and I'm really sick of it, because that's what we accused, that's what we found to be the problem in the leftist Marxists, and here you guys are doing the same thing. Is pedophile real? Absolutely. Absolutely. But you can really ruin people's lives by pointing fingers at them without evidence. Okay, and the say-so of one person isn't enough. I don't care what you say. The situation going on with Nixon right now, yeah. Okay, there's some good, strong evidence. There's been some good investigation going on there, and it's probably going to expand. I hope so. The women that were involved in that, and I suspect there might be kids at some point. I don't have any proof of that right yet. There's some indications, but if grown people want to interact in those ways, that's their business. But of course, in this situation, we found out that there was probably RICO, force, threats, things like that that were going on underneath the surface. And finally, that's starting to come out. Like I say, consenting adults, I really don't care. Different types of sexual behavior, as long as it's agreed to by the people without force, who cares? But the moment force takes part, then you've got a problem. I could go in deeper on that, but we don't want to do that here today. By the way, the chat is on. Let me double check and make sure it is. I think it is. As you can see, I have a little different setup this morning. I just didn't want the map. I was saying I wanted to be a little more calm and collected, a little warmer atmosphere than a map in the background, kind of to keep me from blowing up like I did last night, but there's no guarantee of that, as most of you know. Okay, let's move on from that. I just wanted to get that out again. If you want any more particulars, I think I hit on it last night, but that's what I'm going to call them from now on. They're not QAnon followers, they're QAnonites. I'm going to put them right where they are. They're a sect, they're a cult, and it's getting worse by the day. Okay. I listened to a show by Dan Bongino last night, and it was absolutely excellent. He talks about how it's the leftists again, and some people don't want to talk left-right paradigm, and I understand that, but for lack of a better term at this point, they're bringing up, it was on Carter Page, and now the whole thing with the FISA warrant has come out to show that it was bogus, what the intelligence community heads and rank and file too. They always want to say the rank and file are okay. It's the heads of these agencies that are bad. No, there's a problem all the way down through, and there's been a lot of information about that lately, which I might bring out. There was I think it was True Pundit Thomas Paine that brought that up too. That this thing is corruption all the way down through the agency, and it has to be dissolved. As a matter of fact, that he's making that his work right now is to help to get the FBI in particular disbanded, because apparently he was a member of the FBI, probably retired, I'm not sure. I don't really know who he is. But at any rate, so Dan Bongino's talking about the situation with Carter Page, and now it's having problems. Of course, we're seeing all this corruption and the lies and all of that this whole Mueller investigation is built on, which was really started out as a counterintelligence operation, illegal, by the way. So then they go over to now they're switching back to Papadopoulos because they're hoping that the people, and Bongino made a good point of this, that the media and the establishment, the deep state, will go back and forth because Americans have such a short memory. All they worry about is their beer and their football games and whatever else. They don't see the world and the problems that are going on around us. So their attention span is short. So now they switch back to Papadopoulos, and he says, and so when they run that out dry, and then that comes back to obviously be a hoax as well, then they'll move back to Carter Page, and I have to say Carter Page because I don't want to get it confused with Lisa Page, of course, who's the FBI attorney who worked with Strzok and McCabe. But at any rate, so that's what's going on there. Dan Bongino, it was a program last night. It was about 45 minutes long. You may want to go listen to it. It's probably one of the most excellent explanations of what this whole thing is about that I've heard in quite a while. So I wanted to bring that up. Also, you might wonder why part of the title here is what is need to know. There's a lot of information right now going. I felt like that their security clearances should have been pulled a long time ago, but I understand why they aren't often. For instance, when I left the Army, I had a top secret SCI clearance myself, and they actually did an update, a reinvestigation in 2002. And they started to conduct it while I was overseas, and I think I told that story once before, and they wondered why I wasn't around. They couldn't find me, and one of my police friends, when they went to him to do the interview with him, part of the background, they asked, well, do you know where he is? And they said, well, if you don't know where he is, I'm not going to tell you. That's what my police officer friend said. So that shows you the right hand doesn't always know what the left hand's doing. But in the end, when I got back, they finished the investigation, came and interviewed me, reinstituted my TSSCI, and I kept it, even though I left the Army in 2004. It didn't expire until late 2006 or 2007. It was somewhere in there because they're 5 years. And there's a good reason for that. You can go to work for a private company and use your, they just double check and make sure that your clearance is up to date. And then there's a little bit more paperwork involved. Something like Raytheon or Boeing or someplace like that has military contracts or whatever, somebody like, working as a contractor for one of the intelligence agencies. There's all kinds of reasons why you can have it after you leave. That's not really the bad thing. What people fail to talk about is the need to know. What kind of information should they be privy to? If you're working for say, Boeing, to get the necessary information about the aircraft that you're working on, or helping to develop or whatever, then you have a need to know for that little slotted area there. You don't need to know everything else. Your clearance doesn't give you access to everything. The need to know takes a very important part of what you can see. Now, with these guys like Clapper and Brennan, having been in the types of positions they were in, they probably, by the people inside the agencies who are trying to change the government, probably give them access to all sorts of things because that's what they had access to when they were in the government. But it would be very easy just to say, look, your need to know is only in this area here now. Anybody who gives you information outside of that, they're going to get in trouble for it, kind of like leaking. But at any rate, that's been an explanation that has escaped a lot of people now. I frankly don't know why. Clapper, for instance, they're saying in these hearings, well, Clapper shouldn't lose his security clearance because him losing his security clearance will be a national security threat. What? What? Because he can still, the idea is that he can still help the or the new fellows in there working. They can call him up and say, look, I've got this problem. Not call, but contact him. We've got this problem. What would be your experience to help us out in this? And I understand that's what they're thinking. But he's shown that he doesn't need to know. He doesn't need to know. And so, at any rate, they could cut him off that way. Frankly, I'm not against taking their security clearances altogether. If somebody did if a lower bureaucrat or agent did even a fraction of the things that these guys have done, they would have lost their security clearances. So it's time to stop stroking these guys and get rid of them. Now, the question is, why didn't Trump do it prior to this? And Dan Bongino kind of talks about that, and that's why I'm kind of linking those two. There's very likely that there was a marker in these FISA releases, in the FISA warrants. And they can tell by what people talk about whether they're leakers or not. In other words, there are little evidences in these different things, and the reason why they've allowed these guys to keep their clearances is so that they can identify how much they have leaked and to whom over a period of time. That's apparently now coming to an end. According to Dan Bongino, that investigation is complete. Now, he doesn't have a need to know either, so he's not sure, but he has the experience to say that's probably where it is. So my hope would be that, in fact, all those people, right? Clapper, Comey, Brennan, Hayden, and we could go on down the list, that they all lose their security clearances at a minimum, and I hope that eventually they get charged with some type of crime, because they should. So I wanted to bring that up. I'm kind of speeding through some of these things. That's what happens when you take some time off. And like I say, I'll talk about it more at the end. I'm not even sure that and I don't mean to disappoint everybody. I'm kind of surprised I would anyway. You know, the people that follow me are great, and I appreciate you being here. But like I say, I'm just not sure. My insider from California, Republican insider from California, is going, Roy, you got to stick this out. You got to stick it out. And you know, I've put out videos too where I said, you know, keep your resolve. Stay on course and that kind of thing. But, you know, I try to hit information from an angle that nobody else does. Probably worthwhile, but I don't know. So anyway, I'm leaving that open still. I'm not sure where that's going to end up. Like I said in my little live stream last night, I'm really tired of the shit show. I'm really tired of it. You know, how long does Congress say that, we're going to have a resolution to hold them in contempt, or you know, we're going to go after this guy, or we're going to go after that. Sessions is AWOL. I mean, the whole thing is just so. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I'm beginning to think, like a few others. Actually, I've thought it for a long time, that the whole thing is a distraction to keep us from finding out what's really happening. What's that? Maybe we'll talk about that some more sometime, not today. Okay. We have found out that Strzok is and I've talked about this for a long time. What did I talk about during the Boston bombing analysis that I did? That this was a war going on in the government, especially between the good and bad parts of the FBI and the CIA, because they were trying to meld these under the IC, which is against the law, by the way, and other things. But now we find out, and this hasn't been talked about very much, that Strzok is apparently part of an interagency group holding positions in both the FBI and the CIA. That has been my point for a long time, that they're melding all of these things into one. They appear to be different aspects, and of course there is some jealousy between the agencies. I'm not denying that, but that in fact the FBI has been part of the CIA and vice versa for a long time. So that's kind of come out now. I hope that they see. That's another thing that needs to be done to stop that. I remember twice. Once when I was, well, actually both times I was still in the Army, whether I was reserve or active, and I was approached by people in the intelligence community to do things. And the second time, the first time I said, no, I'm not interested. And the second time that happened, I thought, you know, I want to just see what the process is here. So I went along with it. And it was with a front company. Of course, they didn't say they were CIA there, and I won't name the company, but it was a company, of course, that was doing intel or contract work is what the claim was for the CIA. But at any rate, So I went and did the interviews, and guess what their major concern was? It wasn't if I had criminal behavior. It wasn't anything. The only thing they were concerned about, get this, is if I had worked officially for another intelligence agency. Not foreign. They didn't say, were you ever part of a foreign intelligence agency, or did you have contacts or anything like that with a foreign intelligence agency? No. They wanted to know if I had ever worked seriously for another intelligence agency. That's what they were concerned about. You see what's going on here? Because they spy on each other. Because there's this war going on, Anyway. So, at any rate, I saw that. They didn't pick me, by the way, because I said, well, of course, you have my resume there. I did do military intelligence operations while I was on active duty at various times. And so, and I named the spots, which I won't do here. And that pretty much was the end of that. So, interesting. I guess if I had sworn fealty to them one way or the other, that would have been different, but I think they could tell I wasn't prepared for that. That was in Virginia, by the way. Guess where? Right outside Langley. Yep, that's where it was. It's where they sent me for the interviews. Okay, so I know a little bit about the procedures and what they're worried about. And they are worried about good white hats getting into their organizations to find out what bad things they're doing. Absolutely 100%. So that's why I go back to, we need to use the U.S. Marshals. The President needs to use the U.S. Marshals and the DHS with DOD, particularly the Marines in support, and raid the FBI and the CIA. And I am absolutely 100% serious about that, as are Chris Farrell, Craig Sawyer. I think I even, like I said, I've seen Matt Brackton, I believe, say that. Those two guys are SEALs. And there have been some others now that are calling for that. And there's really no other way to fix this. And even that won't fix it, but at least we can try to get it back on the right track, which is not the case right now. By the way, I wanted to mention that the FISA evidence, if you don't understand what happened there, it's a circular evidence trail. In other words, the FBI gave information out and then got it from other sources where it eventually ended up, and then claimed that they got it from those people. Do you understand what happened there? It's like if I said, let's say I say to you, red. Okay, and you've seen this. There's a game like this, right? Red. I give that information to you, red. And then you give it to somebody else, and you give it to somebody else. And then here I am, the FBI agent that gave you the information. I came up, and I'm talking to this new person, and they go red to me. Well, I fed that information into the system to begin with. You see what happened there? That's circular evidence. It's basically a form of parallel construction, and they do that all the time. And that's why I told President Trump in a tweet, this type of stuff, they're not just doing to you, Mr. President, they do it to American citizens. I've seen it, both in my professional career and in my personal situations. I've seen it. They're evil, cunning criminals. The FBI is a criminal enterprise, no doubt about it. Which brings up, I might as well say this. This was on True Pundit this morning. On Twitter, Thomas Paine at True Pundit tweeted about his about Comey's statement. He either stated it or tweeted it that, and it was something about he was tweeting about his righteous FBI career and how good he was. And apparently there was an agent, a current FBI agent, and there are good ones. I'm not saying there aren't. But the entire recruitment campaign was looking for the type of SJWs you see in Antifa today, and that kind of a mindset. That's who they've got in there. I saw it firsthand. That's also the case with other agencies like the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, the IRS, etc. Anyway, this agent apparently answered Comey and said, "You and the FBI ruined our lives." Yeah, no, you weren't a righteous leader of the FBI. You and the FBI ruined our lives. Good on that FBI agent. Now the next thing you need to do is come out and testify to Congress. You need to make that official. And I know how dangerous that is, but desperate times call for desperate measures. If you don't want your family destroyed, you got to do something, and the rest of the country and the world. Okay. Cliven Bundy, he sent out a tweet this morning. There is the trial going. That Trump pardoned the Hammonds up in Oregon, right thing to do. But you know that the Bundy, much of the Bundy family and some of their friends went up to Oregon to try to help the Hammonds. Unfortunately, by taking over the Malheur Refuge, it caused a whole shift in concern from the Hammonds onto the Bundys and on the refuge, which was a major mistake in my estimation, and I said so at the time. They would have done a lot better if they hadn't done that. But at any rate, the murder, and that's what it was, of Lavoy Finicum, we found out, of course, first of all, the gun they found on him was a throwaway gun. I'm 100% sure of that. And the reason why he moved into his side was because he had been shot there. It was an automatic movement. When you get hurt, you reach for it, and then they use that as an excuse to shoot him. Anyway, the FBI agent who lied, his name is, let me see if I got this right, Joseph Astarte, I think is how you say his name. The trial began yesterday in Oregon because he lied under oath that he did not fire his weapon. And Cliven made a good point. He says, guess what his defense is? His lawyer presented a defense, and the defense is, well, it couldn't have been him because he doesn't miss when he shoots. He doesn't miss what he's shooting at. That's the guy's defense. And these are the types of assholes that our government has put in positions of power and control in law enforcement. And then the training on top of it. It used to be you use what's called a use of force continuum. And now it's shoot first and ask questions later because of officer safety. When you wear a badge and a gun, you take that risk on you. And I'm not saying that your life isn't important, but the training's gone too far, and it is Israeli training. Unfortunately, it is. Saw that at Bundy Ranch. Okay, there's a big push finally. We've been talking about the censorship in the social media, and President Trump now is tweeting about the shadow banning. The Republicans in Congress are now starting to talk about the shadow banning they're experiencing. And, of course, Twitter in particular has been denying that or saying that, it's an algorithm problem or whatever. No, it isn't. Because if it was an algorithm problem only, it would also be happening to others like Democrats, etc., and it's just not. So hopefully they'll start to take some action here. There's going to be a problem, of course, but I think that they can get around it. Where's Sessions? AWOL. He's still worried about grass, right? About weed? Yeah. Oh, he's doing a couple of other things, I think. At least he's claiming he is. I'm not sure it's in fact true. But in the big important issues of the day, he's AWOL. He's not just missing in action, because people use that, Sessions is missing in action. The idea of that is that he was in the action and he got taken out. He's not even in the action. He's AWOL. He's absent without official leave. He has gotten out of the service of his country. He's in the service of himself and the deep state, Hillary Clinton, etc. And anybody who tries to tell you otherwise either doesn't know what they're talking about or they're lying, which is another reason why I blocked a lot of those folks. The thread of tears, as I call them. And there are a lot of them, they do threads on Twitter and other things, and they sound real smart and all this stuff. But they go through, what they do is they go through a document, they have a particular point of view that they want to support. So they go through and they find one sentence or one paragraph, or they might find one or two, whatever, throughout the document or whatever. And that's the thing that they concentrate on. They say, here's the gold in this whole thing, is this little sentence or paragraph out of the entire document. And this shows what it's really about. And what they do is they build their whole agenda and their whole story, their whole movement, all their followers and everybody around that hope, that twisting of the information, and they forget about the context of the whole rest of the document and all of the other evidence. That's what they do. The question is why? Well, everybody wants to be right, and I understand that. And sometimes you need to try to get on something because your economic well-being might be dependent upon it, which is why I don't depend on this for my economic well-being, so I don't have to play that silly-ass game, which is actually detrimental, not only to you, but to myself if I were to do that in the long run. So, at any rate, there are probably a lot of reasons why people do that. I'm not going to cogitate or guess as to the reason why in all circumstances, but I will just say that it's dishonest. The bottom line is that it's dishonest, and it's hurting the conservative. Let me rephrase that. It's hurting the ground reasons, the base reasons for the restoration of the Constitutional Republic of the United States and the Second American Revolution. It's actually not helping it, because it's giving people the wrong idea, and they think that all this secret stuff that's happening in the background is actually helping President Trump when it's not. President Trump is doing something, but it's not with Sessions, it's not with Rosenstein, it's not with Mueller. It's with, and I mentioned it the other day, giving credence and credit to the American intelligence media who brought this out. There's probably a division of the DHS and another division of the Treasury Department, along with the U.S. Marshal Service. So, in fact, those things probably are happening. So if there are things occurring out there, it's through those organizations. How they get around the DOJ with filing the charges, I'm not sure how that works, honestly. I'm not sure how that's going to work, because the DOJ is supposed to actually follow through with that, but there's probably a mechanism for it. Some people say, well, military tribunals, I don't know about that. There are reasons why that's probably not the case, but I could argue that either way, but we're not going to do that here today. It's interesting that they're still talking about Russian meddling. You know, this is a non-issue. Everybody meddles in everything. Meddling doesn't have anything to do with interfering with an election. Not really. The real interference in our election didn't come from the Russians, and I think most of the people that follow me know that at this point. The real people that interfered in our elections were the DNC, Hillary Clinton, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the British, and the intelligence services in all of those places. RIC, manifestly so, prima facie at this point, manifestly so, you can see that they interfered with our election, supposedly to protect the democracy of the United States. We're not a democracy. They're talking about protecting their power, protecting their view of themselves as the legitimate governing part of our government. They're out of control. And this is what happens. And we need to rein it in. And I just hope that President Trump can accomplish this. But I'm seeing other people talk about situation now where even if Trump is successful, if this thing isn't changed, if our thinking isn't changed, if our understanding of what personal liberty is really about, what I call the perfect law liberty, if we don't get that understood by a majority of the people now, it'll be lost shortly after he leaves office. And that's what they're counting on. I read a very good article the other day. It was sent to me by a member of one of the agents of Able Danger, by the way. She sent it to me, and I probably quote more of it today. I think his name is Kowinski or something like that, and he did a very good explanation. Actually, let me pull that up because I think it was very good. I know I'm talking a lot this morning. I really need to go to the chat. We've already been doing this for 40 minutes, but this was so good. I want to give credit to her for sending me this. Let me make sure I can find it. Maybe I got that wrong. Maybe it wasn't from them. Let's see. Okay, gee, it may not have been. Yeah, I guess it was. No, it was from another person, which I won't make their name. Probably a member of Able Danger as well, because they're all interconnected. By a Tom Kaczynski, I guess is how you see his name. He wrote it on July 25th, 2018. It's called "Don't Fool Yourself, the Left is Still Winning." And what he's saying here is that they're thinking long term, that they, it's the principle of the boiling, of cooking the frog in water, that they turn it up. They only go so far. When they get resistance, they back off, and they basically confront the resistance by using for instance, the educational system to change the mindset of the people that are now going out from the institutions and into the population at large. So it's a very slow process, and they're good with that. They would like to have it happen quickly, but they understand that usually causes pushback. So they're still at that. So until we're willing to recognize that for the evil that it is, and to make it, it's really hard when you have the First Amendment. And I definitely would not put the First Amendment aside. But even Thomas Jefferson said that the press was a problem, that they lie, even in his day. Everybody has an agenda, and the wicked, it's a Saul Alinsky tactic, will use our goodness against us. That they have the right to free speech, but we don't, for various reasons. And so somehow or another, we have to get the courage to attack that and call it for what it is. And I don't know, I still don't know if the American people have that in their guts to do. And I'm still kind of questioning whether I'm going to end this program with something today that, well, we'll see. Anyway, the point is, the left, for lack of a better term, the leftist Marxists, okay, I'll call it that way, their program is long term. It's very much like the Illuminati in that they look at generations of making these changes. And I'm talking about the bad Illuminati. Again, there's a mirror image of light. But at any rate, so it's a very serious thing. And they still, you talk to a lot of people on the street, yeah, there's still a lot of good conservative people coming up, but they're being influenced. A lot of people are being influenced by what's being said out there, this whole transgenderism thing and all that, which really, it's evident in Christianity. And I know people won't understand that, but the fact of the matter is that it is, because they misunderstand the scriptures, they misunderstand the euphemisms of the time, and try to interpret it under today's understandings. But at any rate, yeah, they haven't finished, and they're not going to go away unless we get serious about fighting them. And of course, we don't want violence. I'm not saying that, but we have to totally resist everything that they do against us. And I don't know if the American people are up to it. Certainly the Europeans weren't. Look where they are. Look where they are. I might talk about a little more of that towards the end here, because I've had some questions about some of the other things that I've worked on and done in the past. Of course, a lot of you know about. Okay, let's run along here. Good news: Trump is moving to take over the Fed, basically by appointing the head of the Federal Reserve. That'll answer to him, not to Rothschild. We'll see how that works out. I sure hope that he can do that. That would certainly go a long way to helping the constitutional republic be restored and the Second American Revolution to be successful. That is the main reason why Russia is under attack now. That's the main reason why Syria is under attack now, why Iraq was taken over, all those places like that, Libya. It's because they weren't under the Federal Reserve International Monetary System, which is run, of course, out of London with the Rothschilds primarily. Again, on that score, as I said a few minutes ago, to counter Trump, we've talked about the need for DHS and the U.S. Marshals and the DOD and support to help Trump go after the FBI, the CIA, and maybe even the IRS and the Federal Reserve. Now there are leftist Marxist Democrats in Congress calling that to counter Trump, they need to have the military instigate a coup and take down the president and by a coup or by assassination or whatever to stop what's happening. You see, as I said for a long time, there is now a divide in the minds and hearts of the people. And it's, at this point, it's unbridgeable. And I've seen some other commentators write about this. I'm not going to write about it, but it's there. This divide is never going to be, that breach is never going to be crossed again. It's never going to be, there's never going to be a bridge between them. It's a chasm, a bottomless pit between us. We'll never get that to go back together. It will not happen. And that's not good, because that means that there's probably some serious violence in the future, and that's unfortunate. And depending upon the spiritual strength of the American people, especially a certain segment of it, which I won't talk about here, unless they get that heart back, they're going to lose. We're going to lose it, despite what Trump is doing. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the writing's on the wall. So they will use, as I said, they were going to use, when Hillary got in, they were going to use the military to squash us, the conservatives. Would the military have gone along with it? A lot of people say they wouldn't. No, there's a division in the military too. You saw that with the newly commissioned lieutenant from the United States Military Academy, West Point, who was saying that, you know, he was a communist and, you know, Che Guevara was his idol and all that kind of stuff. It's out there, and it's definitely a problem. It's infiltrated the highest ranks of our services in our service schools and in the training. It definitely has. Probably folks want to let me talk about Toronto for a minute. And all I'll say is that we told you so. And it's just going to get worse. Events in Toronto and in the EU are all evidencing, you know, what we've said, that this is an invasion by the Islamic nations. And however the treaties were and the laws and all that were put in place for refugees, you don't put those, you don't keep those instead of protecting your people. And unfortunately, they're not protecting their people. Now, as we see with the Toronto thing, the denial first of wanting to give the guy's name and any indication it might be a terrorist attack, etc., governments are now not just unable to protect you. Governments now refuse to protect you so that they can push this invasion agenda. And criminal behavior across the board anyway, because that's how they make war against the citizenry. Well, let's rephrase that. That's how they make war against the good people of their countries, who they want to subdue and to make them subject to them. And in some cases commit genocide, which is the next step in Europe. It's going on right now, and it's going to happen in the U.S. unless we wake up. And I made a point here that with this refusal by the government to protect its people and instead favor the political correctness of these insane invasions, that this is not just a mere act of betrayal. Let's rephrase that. It's not just a mere act of misunderstanding or political correctness or whatever, trying to fix the economic situation or whatever. No, it is an act of betrayal, and worse, it's an act of war. It is. Okay. I think I've hit everything that I planned on talking about today. Yeah, it looks like it. I would like to make a quote from the Bible. that Abel Danger uses as its slogan. That's Field McConnell's group. And it's Ephesians 5:11, and I've seen it elsewhere. And this is really the only reason why I keep doing this. You know, after I stood up against Q and the obvious, I'm not saying that Q is necessarily even bad. It's how it's being used. It's how the direction it's going in. As a source of information, it'd be nice, but that's not what its purpose is. But after I came out and then exposed Q, starting after the DEFCON 1 ridiculous situation that Q and the QAnons and B and those pushed. You know, I did that, and a lot of people started saying, we don't hear you anymore, and that's fine. You know, like I said, I don't really pay attention to followers or all that. But I guess the point is, why bother, right? Once you've made your point, even Jesus himself, you know, went off into a boat and got away from the people for a while. But at any rate, the only reason really why I continue to do what I do, the only reason is, it's kind of a two-part one reason. One, of course, is I worked for this, as I said before, this Leviathan, this evil government for about 30 years off and on, and was responsible for some bad things happening, not intending them to be that, but understanding how the situation really was and is now. That's one part of the reason. The other was, of course, to get rid of that karma, and the other was because I was hoping that at some point God would say I had done enough. But the only reason why I continue on is because of Ephesians 5:11, and I'll just quote it. Quote, "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them." That's actually a commandment, if you think about it, the way it's stated. Yeah, there's some problems with Paul. Historically, I could explain that. It really doesn't matter at this point right now during this broadcast. But the fact is that's true. So I'd like to quote it again. Ephesians 5:11, which is why I continue to do what I do. "Take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them." Very true. Okay. I'm going to jump to chat. Let's see what we got here so I can hit a few of these. Brian Herrick, isn't he Mormon? I don't know. You're probably talking about me. I used to be. No, I'm not anymore. But that experience taught me more about cultic behavior. And even if I was Mormon, what's your problem with it? You know, this is the problem that we're seeing. We get wrapped around these little disagreements over dogma, over, understanding of Scripture, whatever. And you lose the big picture. And the big picture is, what are the two great commandments? Number one, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, might, and mind. Number two, love thy neighbor as thyself. Man, upon those two are all the law and the prophets. And yet you want to point fingers at somebody because of their understandings. God will work it out. You don't need to worry about it, okay? Don't try to steady the ark. God knows what's in the heart of each and every individual, and he will present them with the information they need to find the truth as long as they want it, honestly. That's not your job, despite what you think. You steady the ark and you're going to be taken down. Let God do his work with each individual, working with them with the understanding that they have. It was like with me. I went in the Mormon church. I was a convert. But I continued to look, and things didn't make sense, and I left. Actually, they threw me out, but I had left in heart and mind before that. Who killed Jesus? The Romans. Bottom line. And my book, matter of fact, I have a copy of it here, which I'll show you. Okay, I've done this before. This is the only thing I ever really advertise because it's something that you can go on Amazon and get. This tells you who killed Jesus. My mentor, my PhD guy was Robert Eisenman, one of the world's foremost Dead Sea Scrolls scholars, who actually gives, I had to read that in here. I think I will for a minute here. Let me read what he says about it. This is his review of my book after I wrote it. And what this book does is it tells you who Jesus was historically, And a lot of people are going to get upset about it. It doesn't matter. This is not the New Testament rewritten in a New Testament format. It's not a rehash of the New Testament. It's based on the historical events of the time. There are a couple of things I'd change in it at this point, but nothing that really changes the basic concept of what the book's about, the basic thesis. But it tells you who killed Jesus. It was the Roman Empire, okay, and the Herodians, who were not Jews, but were Edomites. They were Arabs that took over the Jewish state at the time and were helped in that by the Romans. They were the ones that killed Jesus, not the true Israelites, not the true Judites. That's not what happened. Anyway, let me read you his notable review. This is Dr. Robert Eisenman, one of the world's foremost authorities on the Dead Sea Scrolls and their applicability to New Testament times, not just the Maccabees. So I'll just quote this. Royston Potter's novel is the way one should go about approaching history in the first century in Palestine, and he does so in an imaginative, thought-provoking, and historically compelling manner. Since one is largely dealing with fictionalized romance except for Josephus, and even at times Josephus, where the first century is concerned, fictionalized romance is the way to correct it, and Potter's experience as a colonel in the U.S. Army gives him an edge over others who are similarly trying to reconstruct the events of this period through the prism of the novel. With a practiced eye, he is able to peer through both the Gospels and Josephus and revive this period with more accuracy than others relying on folk and miracle-working wonder tales. Bringing to bear the precision provided by the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is one of the sources I used, he has brought to life a gospel truth more incisive than previous, more wide-eyed Neoplatonic forays. Choose it for your must-read list. It's not a page burner. This is a fictionalized novel written by a historian, okay? So I'm really not a novelist, but I thought that it was the best way to present the material. And so if you're interested, you can get this book. It's the third book that I wrote. I was going to write a sequel to this, but I started with the draft, the manuscript, and I just haven't felt the necessity to go there at this point. This was something almost too much for everyone. So I don't know. The second book was going to be about how they used, there was a movie that just came out. It's a sequel to, what's the name of the movie? I can't remember now what the name of it was, because this is not part of the script. But at any rate, Mel Gibson's movie about Christ. For some reason, I can't remember the name of it. The Passion of Christ. Thank you. Somebody probably just wrote it. The Passion of Christ. There's a sequel now about the influence of Paul in Christianity. Well, my book was going to be to counter that traditional concept of Paul and what was really going on there. Okay. But this was almost too much for people. So anyway, if you want to read about who killed Jesus and what that was all about, you can get that book on Amazon for $20. Like I say, it's not a page burner, but it'll give you some good information. And it's remotely entertaining at some points. Okay. Spirit of Truth. Dr. James Wickstrom said it was the Jews as they had to make the choice, Barnabas or Jesus. So no. See, that's where you're wrong, and I don't have time to go in that. But you don't even know. It's not Barnabas. It's Barabbas. You don't even know what the name Barabbas means, do you, Spirit of Truth? And I don't mean to attack you. You're a great person. You're here all the time. But no, there's a difference in the concept of what a Jew is compared to what a Udite is, and this will tell you about that. This will tell you the difference between a Jew and a Udite. Jews is a normal term for people during that time, but that had more of a nationalistic tone to it than it did spiritual or religious, and this explains that. No, the Jews did not kill Jesus. As a matter of fact, the Judites, let me put it that way, did not kill Jesus. The Romans did. And through their puppet masters, or through their puppets, the Herodians, who were Jews, but only in name. They were actually Edomite Arabs. Okay? But I'm not going to get into all that today. That's really not important. Barabbas, son of the Father, absolutely. How you know something there. Haleus Media, JN14, exactly. That's exactly what it means. Barabbas means son of the Father. It was actually a brother of Jesus. That's who that was. And that's going to freak a lot of people out, but that's who that guy was. He was also known as probably as Judas the, let's see, if actually a couple of names. I'll just give you one of them here. We would probably know him as Judas Iscariot, which means, the Iscariot means that he's of the assassins. That's really what Iscariot, that wasn't his name. He was of the assassins, of the Sicarii at the time. That's probably all I ought to tell you about. Get the book and read it. Okay. All right. Oh, no, Judas hung himself. Okay. Fine. Blind Faith. Trump's decision to overthrow Iran is a bad one. I'm back and forth. I've been watching that, I think, as I've told you. I've been watching that in the Syria thing. That whole situation there is something that troubles me with Trump's foreign policy. I don't like the mullahs. I don't think the Iranian people like them. But the real reason for going after Iran, I'm afraid to say, is to try to outmaneuver Russia. That's really what it's about. And I hope that Trump doesn't go too far with it. Let's just put it that way. Abe Sinclair says, Roy is the smartest of all the lost boomers. Huh. So if I'm the smartest of all the lost boomers, I'm still lost. I guess that's what that means. Actually, that's kind of funny, Abe. Abe Sinclair, that's good. You got to laugh at yourself sometime. If you don't, that's not good. Yeah, I've been following the FBI trial, Finicum. I just mentioned at the beginning of the show here, the agent who, he was finally arrested for lying under the investigation, saying he didn't fire his weapon, and his defense is he doesn't miss when he shoots. That was his defense. That's ongoing. They were out to assassinate Finicum. There's no doubt about it. Finicum was actually the bright mind in that whole group. He understood more than even Ammon Bundy did, and they wanted to take him out, and they set it up so that they could do that. It was a planned assassination, a planned murder, and I think that they could prove that guy shot him, or was one of the ones who shot him, and they should hang for it. Absolutely, I don't care if they are FBI. By the way, I could tell you more about them, but I won't. We'll see if it'll come out. They'll try to hide as much as they can in the trial. We need somebody from the FBI like we did with Larry Wooten from the BLM, who by the way, his second memo, Judge Navarro still allowed it to be suppressed in the Todd Engel case, and Todd Engel was sentenced to 14 years by Navarro. Travesty of justice. But that's what our system is. Our system. They've concentrated on the appearance. Well, it really is due process, but they try to make it look like justice, and it isn't. Somebody had to pay for standing up against Hillary Clinton and Harry Reid. That's what that's about. Bruce Minot says, "Who does that crap? What kind of law officers are the FBI?" It is a criminal enterprise, and most people are realizing that now. And a lot of the people will say, well, it was just the very top that was corrupt. No, it's throughout the entire organization. I'm not saying there aren't good ones. There are. But the recruitment campaign over the last 20 years has been designed to corrupt the FBI and to change the principles. I mean, fidelity, bravery, and integrity, it's all a lie. Institutionally. They want to protect the institution, not the constitutional republic. Do you see what I'm saying? That's what they're after. They're after to protect their beloved institution because their institution gives them power, not to protect the American people, but to abuse them. Okay? That's what the FBI is about now. Yeah, the organization is the corrupting influence. Absolutely. You're absolutely 100% right. They won't police themselves. But see, they won't even submit to Congress that has a constitutional right to control them. Or the president, for that matter. Disband the FBI now. More and more people are calling for that, and to turn it over to the U.S. Marshal Service, which will be difficult in some ways. I'm not saying the U.S. Marshal Service, and I've talked about this before, is clean, one owner. It's not. There's some real problems with it, but it's definitely not as corrupt as the FBI. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Joseph Williamson, the Iraqi children died from the sanctions of medical and food. Exactly. And they want to do the same thing now with Iran and Syria, etc. And it's not because of Al-Qaeda or even the threats of the really powerless mullahs. It's because they're not part of the banking system. And I think Trump understands that, which is maybe why he's trying to go after the Federal Reserve, because that's really the key here in the U.S. If Trump really could get control of the Federal Reserve, he might be able to, I don't know if he could stop what the cabal is trying to do in Iraq, Iran, well, Iraq, they've pretty much succeeded, Iran, Afghanistan, they already got Libya, but Syria. Those three, I think, right now are the issue. So when I see him trying to get control of the Federal Reserve, maybe that will give him the wedge to stop this nonsense in Iran. I think we could legitimately have the mullahs taken out. The CIA could do a job there. I mean, I hate it. That's really what happened. That's what started this whole thing anyway. The CIA got involved in throwing Mossadegh out in '53, the elected leader of Iran, and put in the Shah, which there was all kinds of problems with that. And then, of course, the people got tired of that, and the mullahs took over. The CIA really gets involved in too much crap. Or we should just back out completely and let's just let the people in Iran do. That's actually the best thing to do. Let the people just try. I mean, it's terrible. The Iranian government will kill their own citizens who say no. Well, hell, the United States government did. Look at Finicum. And that was a righteous cause, trying to stop Hillary from stealing land from ranchers. Governments are out of control. They are not of, by, and for the people, and neither is ours. Yeah, Amazon Arms, Watchman on the wall you're talking to, I agree, things are really pointing to Christ's return. Yeah, but think more, and I'm not telling you not to believe in Jesus as a person, but really what's more important is that you have the Spirit of Christ in your heart and mind. That's really what the Scriptures say, that the hearts and minds must have the Christ-like Spirit in them, at least in a certain number of the people. How many, I don't know. A third of the hosts of heaven, right, were cast out, right? A third of the hosts of heaven were cast out with Lucifer. Some people say that's who we are. Nah. But the same thing happens in Revelations here. A third of the people are destroyed, right, according to that, how that happens and what's going on, right? Okay. The rich and powerful, Watchman on the wall again says, the rich and powerful must be taken out by God and Christ. It's clear that nothing has substantially happened for a reason. Understand that God works through men. If you understand the Hebrew letters and system, you got to understand that. And most people don't, but at any rate, God works through the fruit of the womb. Farrakhan even said that, and he's right. He does. The eschatological stuff is mostly symbolic by and large. Things will happen in a more natural way than you would perhaps want. And I think you'll see that as this comes about. Okay, I'm not going to get into a Christ talk this morning. Here we go again. Watchman on the wall wants to make, obviously, an effort that you got to know Christ intimately and personally. Shook his hand yet? Have you shook his hand yet? I'll just leave it at that. Fruit of the loom, Bruce, I don't know how to say that. I know, I'm just kidding. That's good. That's good. Clarence Elliott, that's fine. I'm not telling you you can't follow Wickstrom. That's fine. Everybody's going to have a different interpretation. Even Paul said, right? the scriptures are of no private interpretation. Okay, well, hell, we sure have a lot of private interpretations, don't we? Interpretation of the scriptures has to be based upon the Hebrew language. When you look at the Hebrew language, that's how you interpret what the scripture means. It's in the secret of the revelation is in the letters and in the words. The New Testament's difficult because it's in Greek, so you have to take it back to the Hebrew, which is kind of risky. Okay? It can be done, but it's a little risky. But understand that Jesus came to restore the law and the testimony. Right? What's the law? The Torah. He came to restore the Torah. Okay? That's what he was doing. And so you can go back to the Torah, and anything that doesn't match in the New Testament with the Torah, the way it's been translated or whatever, there's a problem. Okay, and I'll just leave it at that. Again, believe it or not, I get into that in here. Okay, so if you want, go grab that. Wow, we've been going for almost an hour and 15 minutes. I guess I ought to shut up now. I've answered a few things here, covered a lot of information. Do you believe, Cynthia Romero, do you believe the Roman Catholic Church is the beast or evil, if you will? Well, I don't want to point to, well, I don't, I used to be a Catholic. Boy, I was a Catholic at one point, and I'm not Catholic anymore. That'll tell you a little bit. I don't think there's any question that the current Pope is a problem, a major, major problem. And there's some evidences to suggest that he fits some of the bill of the Scripture as the false prophet, etc. The beast, no, probably not the Pope. But all of that is open to some other interpretations. Remember, the eschatological symbolism is to help you remember the events and the importance. It's sort of like telling a fairy tale or a story. I'm not saying they're true. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they're put together in such a way that they make an impression on your mind. But then you got to look at the real world. I'll just leave it at that. Converter Rockstone says thank you, and he has a Q. Thank you. Don't get triggered. No. Again, I don't care if people use, it's like I've said before, you can use Q as a source of information like I do the New York Times. Do I like the New York Times? No. The problem is that it's become cultic in its expectations. Okay, that's the problem. All right. Well, I think we're done. Okay, I appreciate you all coming. There's I'm wondering if I should go into another thing here. I think I'll just show you, but I'm not going to go into any detail. Okay, most of you, I think, you know my background. Of course, I was Mormon for a while. I understand cultic behavior. I understand what it can do to you and what it can do to others and how dangerous it is. Oh, somebody's bringing up Elaine Pagel, Patty Collins. Yeah, the Gnostic Gospels. Yes. One of the things that I used in my research. And I'd get into the Gnostic Gospels, but not today, okay? But it did have an impact on this, okay? It did. And rightly so. Even though the Gnostic Gospels were all written about 2 centuries or later after the events of Christ's time, they still have an impact, because a lot of the information in the New Testament was written a century or later after the events of the New Testament. A lot of people don't know that, under pseudonyms, but that gets into arguments, which I don't want to get into today. But yes, I know. As a matter of fact, I talked to Elaine Pagels at one time when I was doing my research. Yeah, I actually had communications with her. That's been many years ago now. Many years ago. All right, you guys are having some really good information here in discussion. Yeah, the New Testament was written in Greek, not Hebrew. That's what I said. I don't know, you're probably having a conversation with somebody else, but that's why I say, to understand really the Scriptures of any private interpretation, you have to understand that the sacred speech was Hebrew. And so they would speak in Hebrew, but it was translated into Greek. So to understand really what they're about, you got to try to get back to the Hebrew you have to translate it back into the Hebrew. And that's not an exact science, because a lot of times you don't really know what they meant in the Greek, because the Greek language was significantly different than the Hebrew. It's sort of like going from Hebrew to English, right? You do miss some of the nuances and the importance. For instance, the letter A in English is just the letter A. It's a phonetic sound. A, ah, right? Well, in Hebrew, it's a meaning. It also means first father. The Aleph, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, has meaning in and of itself, which the English language doesn't, English letters, okay? Meaning in and of itself. The Aleph means the bull. It means the first father. It means God, and some other things. So you're talking about something that is critical in understanding interpretation that we really don't want to get into today. Yeah, Strong's Concordance, Starley Mistriel. I've seen you on here before. I never can say your name right there, but you say Strong's Concordance is helpful as a tool to decipher words and meanings. Absolutely, as is the Gesenius. And I did a whole video series on that about a year and a half or maybe 2 years ago now. It's under the religious playlist here on the channel, so you can go look at that. Wow, I'm going on too long here now. Okay, I will show you these. Most of you already know my background. It's not secret. I've been a public person since about 1978, when I stood up against some things that the Army was doing back then. People say, well, why didn't you stand up when you were in the Army, Roy? I did. Why do you think I never made it past Lieutenant Colonel? And some other things. But after the Mormon Church threw me out, and I went into my long legal battle, which really wasn't even about me. It was about trying to get the government out of our personal lives, especially out of the marriage covenant, which the government has no business in. I know people argue for and against that, but legal marriage didn't even exist until the 1800s, and that was to control miscegenation, as they called it back then. In other words, intermarriage between principally the black race and the whites. But at any rate, that's where licensing came about, and then they saw that it was a big cash cow, so then they just started pushing it all over. But in essence, marriage was a family issue prior to that, at most a church issue or a tribal issue. It wasn't a state issue. Martin Luther was the one who actually started that. But at any rate, so I did this court case back in the 80s, and it was really about that the government has no business dictating the terms of the marriage covenant, the marriage contract, which is basically a contract, of course, between a man and a woman. I'm not PC. I don't care about gays, but that's, and all that LGBTQ stuff. That turns out to be really bad, and then people don't want to link that to pedophilia, but it is. Pedophilia goes across the whole spectrum. Okay, it does. Not just LGBTQ, but we see it in the heterosexual community as well. It's really, really bad, and it's pervasive, and it's getting worse. That's not what I was arguing about. I was arguing about the contract between men and women. Okay, however you want to view that. I'm not here to argue, monogamy over polygamy or anything else here. I just want to tell you about the books. Okay, so I've actually written 3 books. The first one was this one. It's called An Offender for a Word. I wrote this in 1986, I believe. Yes, that's the copyright. This book is out of print. You can't get it. If you can, it's buku bucks. Okay, but it goes through my court case, shows all of the important documents, and the whole point of this book is that it was to show that there is selective enforcement depending upon what you think, not on what you do. It's like Comey said, they want to get into your mind, not into what you do, but into what you think. And this book exposes that. There was an exact case as mine. I had mine in Utah. There was a sister case in Michigan, and they let that officer go back to work and gave him back pay for having multiple relationships. Okay, and a lot of people will think that's bad. The white race is under problems right now because they've misunderstood the whole idea of marriage and procreation and all of that, and we're going to be wiped out. We are. And a lot of people say that's a good thing. I don't think that at all. I don't get upset with other people who want to have interracial marriage. I don't get upset at them. But the white race is going away unless they start paying attention to some principles that they've misunderstood because of the Christian dogma of the last 2,000 years. Anyway, I wrote that book about contracts and the government getting out of contracts between men and women. And then in 1996, I wrote this book, which is still available. Like I say, you can get this, but it's out of print. You're going to pay a bunch of money for it if you want it. No, I don't have any more copies. That's the last one I've got. And then I wrote this one. Okay, this was in 1986, and basically it's my autobiography. And it goes through, again, the court case, some of the difficulties in the marriage arrangements I had at the time, the fight against the government, what was going on. And I thought I'd read something here, because all of my books always have a perfect law of liberty tone to them. And let me read this last thing here so that you'll know. And there's a lot of good stuff in this, I think. Let me grab a couple of things here that I think are important. Yeah, I'm going to read two things. Will you indulge me in that? Okay. Again, it's out of this book. This book is available on Amazon, not as a new book. It's been out of print since probably 2000, I guess, and you'll pay big bucks for it. But you can get it if you're willing to do that. I'm not sure it's worth it, to be honest with you. This I would definitely do if you want some historical analysis in an entertainment form. But let me read you a couple things here. By the way, this talks about some of my involvement in the Franklin cover-up, which a lot of people say, yeah, you didn't have anything to do with that, Roy. Yeah, and I talk about it here, and I wrote this in 96. Actually, I wrote it in like 95, published it in 96. But this talks about some of that, gives some of that evidence, and also and some other things. But anyway, let me read this to you. Just a couple things out of here. and this is going to put some people on edge, but and I might comment on this. Jesus came not to bring peace, but a sword, and the sword is a two-edged sword out of his mouth, to dividing asunder. In other words, that divide that we're seeing now: who will choose the right path and who will not? What your heart and mind is, how you judge between right and wrong, and how you act upon it. It is a division. And so I have decided that I'll just speak my mind and let the chips fall where they may. Let it divide out those who don't want to hear what I have to say. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It might impact whether or not I want to continue this to some extent. But like I say, then there's the Ephesians 5:11 quote, which kind of impacts that. But I don't mind telling you about what I feel and why, okay? I've made my life's story about it. I've made my life's commitment about it. And just because I don't talk about it all the time doesn't mean that I'm trying to hide it. It's just that there are other things that are important, right, that we need to discuss. But a lot of people have wondered about this, so again, let me read this is in the epilogue. I'm going to read a couple things out of this, if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me. Okay? The governments of the state of Utah and the United States continue to allow laws designed and implemented by the LDS Church, talking about laws in Utah, to interfere in and destroy the lives of those the Church identifies as enemies. My case before the courts proved that those laws were established to respect a particular establishment of religion and prohibit the exercise of mine. The governments never articulated a compelling state interest in ruling against me as required by their own laws. They merely stated that a whole system had been designed on the refutable claims of the 19th century, that's when legal marriage started, and that the system of marriage from the Hebrew patriarchs was odious to Western civilization. Allowing this type of warfare upon the citizens and then sustaining it is not in the spirit of their respective constitutions, nor in the ideals they supposedly value. It raises the question, especially in the light of the attitudes and demonstrations of recent years, what the visions of our leaders really are. I believe us and our children to be in grave danger. Probably should have said I believe we and our children to be in grave danger. A few little grammatical errors here. Look at the push for transgenderism, LGBTQ. They would still find fault with me. And again, it's not like NXIVM, okay? There was no force at all. No fraud, no deceit, no threats, things like that. Big difference. Grown men and women, not children, grown men and women deciding how they want to live their lives with each other. Okay, then to show you where I went. And again, I say these types of things in all of my books. I always reference something to do with the perfect law of liberty. And so let me read this and then we'll stop. I'm quoting from my book here in the epilogue, page 263. We need to return to pure law, in parentheses, the protection against plunder, end parentheses, and not remain in the arbitrary realms of whimsical social engineering. Notice I'm talking about this in the social engineering problem in 1996. And not remain in the arbitrary realms of whimsical social engineering that inevitably result in tyranny. Have we not seen that? Was that not? Did I not hit that on the head? Despite the popular myths, our democracy, which is supposed to be a democratic constitutional republic, is rife with tyranny. Although our Constitution is designed to prevent infringements by unjust majoritarian coercion and limit government interference in our lives, the democracy foisted on us by our leaders allows them to act underneath the protective umbrella of the majority and commit unlawful acts in the process. Saw that at Bundy Ranch. We see it every day. Currently, the unjust monarch merely hides behind a shield for his unjust rule, the will of the collective. Where can we place responsibility in such a system? I feel as the Duke of Marlborough, who stated, I do not believe in the collective wisdom of individual ignorance. To correct this, we need only to ensure the inviolability of the Bill of Rights. Every man, woman, and child should ponder the words of Frederick Bastiat in his book, The Law. The purpose of good law is to protect liberty and the individual right to lawful defense against any encroachment. Anything more is plunder or legalized robbery, the use of the collective organization to commit an act that, if committed by an individual, would be a crime. 1996. So I've written 3 books, and they're always about the perfect law of liberty in one way or the other. Okay? All right, we're done. Yeah, William Gibson, you said it right. Know them by their fruits. What more do you need? And basically Jesus said that, right? By their fruits you shall know them. 2 great commandments, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, mind, and strength. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Upon these 2 stand all the law and the prophets. Absolutely. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Surprised it went this long. Hour and a half. I didn't mean it to do that. Of course, I never do. But I do appreciate you being here. I am very much involved in trying to figure out if I want to keep doing this. I really am. Ephesians 5:11 makes its impression upon me every day. Like I said, I think I've fulfilled my promise to God in casting off all the bad things I did for this evil system for 30 years. But that doesn't mean just because I probably fulfilled that I should stop. So we'll see. This live streaming especially is kind of fun, especially with the interactions that I can have with you good folks. I don't know how many trolls are out there. I usually don't even address them anymore. Occasionally. But thank you again for coming. God bless you. God bless yours. Keep your eyes on the horizon, your ears to the ground, your situational awareness on high. They definitely don't like the fact that the second revolution is having so much success, and they're doing everything to stop it. Okay, so you got to keep your wits about you, right? Prep, pray, stay out of the way. God bless the constitutional Republic of the United States of America and the Second American Revolution. And whether he wants it or not, I think he wants it. May God bless President Donald Trump and send him the spirit of discernment that will distill upon him as the dews from heaven, that he may know the right from the wrong and have the courage to do the right thing. I didn't say righteous, righteous, righteous this time. So there we go. I did it now. Thanks again for coming. As things progress over here the next few days, I'll probably do some short updates of one sort or another. I will plan on doing a live stream next Tuesday, formal, kind of like this, maybe with a map in the background next time. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know how important that really is. Okay. Everybody, till next time. Thanks a lot. Out here.